Welcome back to another episode of Building Meditation App with React Native, Firebase, and OpenAI API. In this episode, we are going to continue from what we've done last time, which was onboarding. As you can see, we have these sets of screens that dynamically goes through a couple of questions like name, age, and a couple of questions, which is multiple choice. So after we've done this, after all this, we are saving all the data in the state at this point. If you're going to onboarding question screen, we are having these answers. If I'm logging this, just have more space here. So if I'm logging this, log answers. Let me format this. As you can see here, so all the questions that I answered, all are in one state, which is this state answer. What we want to do after we press this start, we want to save all this data to the Firestore. We save it to Firestore and send the user to the app, to the home screen, which means the user's done with this. And from next time when they log in or open up the app, we're not going to show these questions because the user already answered, and directly they land to the app. So how we do this, like how we are going to save all the data to the Firebase. Okay, if it's a new project on Firebase, you need to go to your Firebase dashboard, which I'm now on the Zenscape dashboard, and you need to go to the build and Firestore database. Once you go there, if it's the first time that you are using this, you need to create the database first. So we're pressing this. And it's basically, the question it asks is, where is the location of the database? If you see here, it says, after you set this location, you cannot change it later. So you need to know where is your initial database location would be, which is something to do with the delays and response delays and all that in the database, which I'm going to select. I'm going to select London, and Firebase database, Firestore database has rules. You can select the rules, and these rules are amazing because it sets who can access what, basically. If you want to go to the start test mode, if you see, there is some rules here, basically. If you read this, it says match the document. You can say which document, and you can say what kind of access you want to give that document, basically in the Firebase rules. I'll show you later how you do that as well. But for now, if you select a start in test mode, so anyone from anywhere can access these data, as this is something that we are doing now for testing and development, it doesn't matter. But when your app goes live, you don't want people to access each other's profile data. So then you need to just tell at this point, for example, you say the match the user path, and then you say, only authenticated, and the person who owns this ID, for example, can access their own data, or can write their own data, can read their own data. If you see now, the match allows read and write if the request time is less than this date, which is basically like a month. It gives me a month time that I develop and do my testing. I can go change this to whatever I want, but at the moment is a testing mode, and it will just says that the database will be open for 30 days. And yeah, and I'm creating with the test mode. Okay, my database is created and it's ready to go. So we don't have anything here. You can create collections here manually. You add name of collection, for example, one collection of users, document, for example, this, and then field name. That's basically, now it's created this database. That's basically what we want to do on our app. We don't want to do this manually. So we have a user, it has an ID, and then it has a bunch of information. And then you can add like lots of different sub collection to this data. So the user can have, I don't know, comments, can have notes, can have all those things. You can add it to the sub collection of this user. So for now, if you don't want this, we don't want, I'm going to delete this. We want to create this from our front end, from our app, basically. So now that Firestore is running, or is set up. So what I'm going to do, all these answers and what I have here, I want to create a state management system that we access to the information, for example, profile information from anywhere in the app. You have different options. For example, you can use complex state managements like Redux, but for majority of use cases that we don't have that much state changes and it's not that complicated, like what we are doing right here, we can use the React context. React context is amazing. You can create a provider which you wrap your app around with this provider, and this provider provide data to different screens. That's what we want to do. I want to create something that when the app launches, this is the theory of what we want to do. When the user logs in or opens up the app, what happens? I want to create this context that basically gets the data, the profile data of the user, and when we update this, it always gets updated, and this information, this state is always available throughout our app, and we can use it throughout a hook from this context. How to create a context? This is a boilerplate that you're going to repeat this every time you are going to create a context for different purposes. I usually create context for different purposes. I don't create one context and put all the data like profile information, notes, like other user data like there. I just create one context for each purpose. For example, now for profile information, I want to create one context. So how do we do that? I'm going here. It's up to you, like how you want to manage your folders. I'm going to create in our source, I'm going to create a context folder. This context folder, I'm going to add any sort of context and our state managements here. And for this purpose, I'm going to create a profile. I'll just make it easy. Profile provider.ts. I need to be at TSX because we want to pass the children and then create a provider here as well. So I'll just do that. Okay. The way it works is I'm going to create a profile provider context, and that create context. And then this create context, I initialize it with, you can initialize your context with a profile and setting the profile. Or I just put this update profile. So you're always going to have access to this profile and this update function, basically. And the update functions, we know it will get a data, the new data we want to pass. And this new data would be an object of the strings, possibly strings and strings. So this data, and then this data would be a record of a string or number, string or number. So a records means like basically an object that has a string here like name and a string here like name. So something like this is what we mean. And I'm just saying it could be like something like activity like 5 something. So I'm just like saying, so I'm saying that basically it could be a string as a key and string as a value, or a string as a key, number as a value. So that's we doing this. This creating context is basically what we need from this. This gives us something called provider. And the provider like this. So basically provider, so this context that we created, it gives us a provider that we can wrap our app around it. I'll show you how. And now we need to actually create our provider. Our provider, let me just use this. That is correct. Yeah, we need to actually import React because we are using TSX or JSX. Import React. Yeah, we need user state, context, create context. Okay, that's working. And this data also, so I can create here type profile data. And this is the type of profile data. We can pass it here. We can also pass it here. So we know like we created a type for this. So this provider that we are getting, we create the context like this. This is a boilerplate that you need to memorize how it works. You need to create a context. You can initiate it with nothing. You can initiate it with nothing, basically. It's a null. You can initiate it with this, or you can initiate it with whatever this is, basically. So we have this profile provider, which we want to export this. Export profile provider. We're exporting this profile provider. We're going to use this to wrap our app basically with this profile provider. And also to use all of this as a hook is easy to, you can use context hook and then every time you need to do this, but I create something called const use profile. I create a hook right here and I use the context, use context, pass this profile context that we created here to this use context. And every time you're going to access, you can use this directly in your app. Every time you want to use it, you need to actually import this, and use the data on that, or create a hook basically to export. So I have like profile and then update profile. So anyway, I want to use this, I can go const, anywhere in my app I want to use this, I would go const profile update equal use profile. This is how I can use this anywhere in my app. I don't need to import these two. You can just like directly import this, doesn't matter. But yes, here what we do, I'll create this and I export this as well. So I can use this anywhere I want and it would have my information and also a function to update this profile anywhere in my app. So how it works is like this provider, you pass the value. Any value you pass here is going to be available on any screens that you wrap this provider basically. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to my app TSX. And if you see in my app TSX, I have these navigator and I have all these screens. So I want this profile data is going to be available on my onboarding and on my app stack. So I need this user profile there and updating it there as well. So on onboarding, we want to update it. And on app stack, we need the data. And at this point, we need to know if the user is onboarded. So we just send them to the correct screens. So what we need to do, we need to now wrap our app with this. So we have this navigation container, which wrap everything our app has. I need to import this provider. Okay, so here basically I'm just like going to export this as a default. I don't need anything else from here. And I wrap my app around this. The problem is at this point, I need the data, I need those provider available before this, basically. So I need it here, but at the moment, everything inside here would have access to this provider. So I'm not going to have access it outside here. What I can do is just anything inside here from these navigator. I'm going to create this in another file. So I have like my navigations. I create here something called app navigator. And I put all my navigator here and also these two as well. So I need to just import these. So also I need this one. Yeah, and I import my stacks here as well. What I've done is only moved everything inside the navigator into another component app navigator. So in this case, why we've done this, because now the profile provider is wrapping everything and I would have access to this. Basically has all the profile provider information. So I would have access to that profile information right here. And then I can do anything on onboarding or all the data that I need on these screens. So just create another level and wrap everything on that level with this provider. So you just need to navigate. That's it. So now everything is profile provider providing everything inside this app navigator. And I remove all these unwanted imports. This. Okay. So it's much cleaner as well. So we have app, and then in our app, we have this app navigator, which now this app navigator, everything inside has access to everything that provider is providing. So in our profile provider back here, we want to create two different things. One is the ability to get the data, because if you see this app provider is wrapping here. So when the app starts at any point, this is starting. So everything inside here will fire. So this one is fires. And then what we want to do, I want to basically get everything from our database, from the user profile. This is for later on that the user actually has a profile. So for that, I'm using a use effect. In this use effect, I can go two ways. I can use still the listener, which was on auth state change. I listen to state of the auth. Whenever the auths change, I know the user is logged in now at this point. And I would say, let's get rid of this. And I would say if the user.uid, which is the user ID, if this exists, and I need to also import auth. If you remember, our auth is coming from this function, Firebase function. It says like needs default export. Let me just disable this. Okay, so we have this that we set up and we exported auth. So I'm importing auth here, passing the auth as we've done this before. If you remember on our use is logged in, we do the same thing. We just listen to this and see if the user exists. We say the user is logged in so we can manage different stacks. At this point, like the profile provider, we can merge this too, but I would just like to have it separately so we can add different logics if we want later on, or if our provider change, we can just swap the logic anyway. So we said if the user exists, at this point, I want to get the user data. Right now, I don't have anything, but the way that it works with Firestore, I need to create a reference to the database, reference to where the user's data saved in the database. So the way that I do that, I just create a const user reference or profile reference. For the profile reference, there's different ways to do it, but like the new way you need to import the import doc from Firebase Firestore. This is document. This is short for document. You want to say on the document, you need to pass the database. Where do we get the database? We need to initiate the database here as well. So we say export const db equal get Firestore, and the Firestore comes from Firebase Firestore. So you just initiate Firestore, that's it. You need to just get this instance that you initiated. So doc, you need to pass db, and you can say users are going to create like a table called users. Here basically we reference anything that is here, users, and you can say user ID, just like that. Just db, we need to import it. Yeah, this is how you can reference this. Or another way to do that, you just create with the literals, you create this. That's how you can also reference a path. Basically, it's much easier because you can just go on, and if you have sub collections and all that, it's very easy to reference. So you say users and user ID. Where do we get user ID? Here, basically on auth change, this returns to us the user that is already logged in, and we know what ID they have. So we want to always reference the user in our database with the ID, authentication ID that we set from the beginning when the user logged in. So we say on the users and on this ID, basically we get the profile reference. We just have now the reference. We haven't requested anything. We haven't got any data. We just create a reference to the location of this data on our database. We can get the data just like this, get doc. This is also comes from Firestore. Just everything is so easy in Firestore. And then you say what doc reference you pass it here. And you need to await this. So this way you have the profile data. But what happens here basically is you got this for the first time. So first time you got into the app, you listen to the auth change, it listens, now you have a user with a UID, and then it just gets the data, that's it. It's just never listen to the data. If the data changes, doesn't matter, just once get the data, that's it. That's if you want to get the data once, this is how you do it. But the way that I want to do it here, I want to always listen to this profile data. Anytime this profile data from this moment on that the app starts, anytime the profile data changes in the backend, I want this to get the data, the new data, and set our profile with the new data. So in this way, it's going to be always, the profile data is always updated. Wherever in our app we update the profile data, we make sure that this context and this state is always having the latest one. There are different ways you can manually run this. You can manually, every time, set the new data, you just set it again to this context, or just set a lesson that Firebase listen to all the changes, and whenever something changes, it directly, your app gets the data and it's get updated. So the way that works is on snapshot. There's another cool thing here. On snapshot, we need to pass the reference to the database, and this basically gives us, I need to pass the reference, and it gives me back a document, which basically on that document, there is this exist function. This is what Firebase on snapshot returns, and you can just run that and see if the document exists. And if the document exists, again, you can run another function, which is data. You call it, and it gives you back all the data, and you set it to your profile. So this is basically a listener. What happens here? There is a listener you run here. on authentication change, this runs, and then it gives you the user. And once it has the user, it runs another listener inside, which this listener basically listens to any sort of data that your profile changes causes, and it sets the profile with that data. If get it from the beginning of the app, get it from the launch of the app, and also anytime that you update, it gets it as well. We need to also, what we need to do, we don't need to set the profile here. And this data is always has the latest data that you have. You don't need to merge any previous data to the new data. It's always have like the latest updated data. In the update profile, so that's how you are going to write it to the backend. I'm going with the try and catch. Because it's an asynchronous function. Async with the try. First, again, we need to create the reference to this. This is the reference we are creating. And we can get this from the auth as well. So if I import auth, yeah, we have the auth dot and user dot user ID. This is like how you can get the user ID from the authenticated user. So at this point, we are authenticated. We are in the app. That's where we want to update our profile data. So we have this auth, and I can just like here say, if this doesn't exist, just return, don't do anything. So the data is an object we are passing. For example, now we want to update this with name and age. So you want to pass, for example, 2 things to this data, but this data, this profile data is maybe 20 different keys into 20 different data. So we want to pass a portion of this, a new update of this, and then we want to update our backend of Firestore with this new data. So this new data basically is an object that we are passing here. The way that you can do that, you can just set it here. You can await set doc. This is again another cool function. And then you just pass the profile. This takes three arguments. Profile reference, the reference to the location of your data, which is user and the user ID. And then set doc, you pass the reference, you pass the data, which is here an object. And I pass merge true, because if already some data exists and we are passing 2 or 3 new keys and new sets of data to this, then it's going to merge it to whatever it already has in the backend. It doesn't have create a new one. If it has it, it merged to that data basically. That's all we need. So we don't need to do anything else. At this point, we are updating our backend, and what happens once this updated, this set calls and the backend updated, this on a snapshot, this is a listener, there's always listening. So this basically gets the new data and set the profile with the new data. So this cycle goes on and on whenever you are just updating something. So this profile state always has your latest data. Again, same as what we've done on login, I will initiate this with undefined, because I don't want to null or anything. I want to know that this is not initiated yet. If it hasn't initiated, I know it's not initiated and we haven't requested backend, so it's undefined. Whenever this initiated, then we're going to have a data. And if we don't have this user, which means like we are logged out now, I can empty the user profile now. Else, I can set it back to undefined basically, yeah. So whenever like we don't have data and we are logged out, this calls again. And then we don't have this user ID anymore. So it just clears out all the profile data and exit the app. So technically this should work. Let's try this. So we are also exporting this. We are having this use profile. We can use this as a hook. Let's go try this. So where we want this is our onboarding question screen. We have this, and there was one part on next is not last. Okay. So every time we call this on next, so whenever the step is completed, on next calls this, and if it's not the last one, we want to go to the next, scroll to the next question, and if it is the last one, if it is the last one, I just want to actually create a type for this so we know what the type for this is. Okay, let me explain this. I just created a profile, a type of this. So this what profile is, what the update profile is, which is the profile is profile data, which we defined it here, a type. That is basically an object with a string as a key and a string or number as a value. And or undefined, or it could be nothing. And also here I have this update, which is get the profile data, which is an object again, same as this, and returns a void promise, which is this one, asynchronous, and we await and set the data. So that's now selected this. I also written this as curly brackets. I just have profile and update profile. Yeah, that's correct. Now I'm importing this, use profile. Great. Update profile. So you're saying like if it's, so now I imported this, use profile and update profile. And I'm saying if it's not the, if it's the last, not the last one, go to the next one, scroll. And if it is the last one, which you want to save the data, just save the data, save the answers, and that's it. So now if I save this, potentially we need to actually see that it's working. Just let me go back here. Instead of importing DB from there, I'm going to actually use this because it's going to be easier probably. But just more efficient. So I'm going to say const db my database, and I just get it from Firebase directly. So if you call this get Firestore, if I'm going back to my Firebase, so we just initiate it here and we can import this, but I'm going to get it from, if you have any error or any issues, like just import it from the get files, because this is already initiated in our app, and anywhere in our app we can use just this, and we can call this get the DB, pass the DB, and work with that database reference. So let's try this. I'm going to, let's make this bigger. Okay. So now we are the last one. Let's see here. Yep, we called Firestore. And yeah, so at this point, now I should have all this information in my database. Let's see. Yes, now I have the users, and it creates me a unique ID, user ID, and all the information I passed are here. What I want to do, because we want to see next time, we want to see if the user actually has onboarding, done this onboarding or not. I can add another key here called has onboarding, another key called has onboarding, and it's true or false, which is basically is going to be later on when I'm checking this, if the user has this key in their profile. So say if the user has this key, I pass them. I can also check all these questions and see if they have all these questions. But the problem is down the line in your app, if you want to change the onboarding for some reason, and now your previous user don't have that question anymore. So you have a new question, for example, surname or something, and then the previous users don't have that. And if you want to check all these to see if all these available, then the user already done this. Then in that point, your old users won't have that key, and then it sends them back to the onboarding, which is not a good experience. So it's good to have a key that indicates the user passed this step. It's like the easiest and best way to do it, to be honest. So how I can do that is basically when I want to submit these answers, I can just say answers, everything in answers, and then I say has onboarding, and then I say true. I need to also do, because we said the update is this data. Let's go back here to our provider. I basically said this type data accept string number. I should now say boolean. And now everything's okay. So we accept boolean. So when we just updating this, we also add another key says this is done. So this is true. Let's do this again. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I think I've done it. Has onboarding. Does he have it? Let's see. I'm not sure if I pressed the last step. I think I didn't. Okay, now I did. Cold files, so yeah. Oh, I think I haven't saved this one. I'm just wondering what's happening. So yeah, I haven't saved this one. Let's click this again. Yeah, now we have this onboarding. Has onboarding. True. So it means that this user with all this data has done this part of onboarding. So now it's very easy for us to create a hook that basically recognizes if the user has done this step or not. Let me just clean complete. And the answer. Okay, we go to our app navigator, this one. So here has onboarding or don't have onboarding. So I need to basically now create a hook here. We use has onboarding. And I create a hook. That should be here. Yes. Use has onboarding. Yeah. Don't need any arguments there. What we need is basically const. I need my profile information and get it from use profile. This is the hook that we created. So at this point, we should have all the information here. And then we create a use effect and we listen to this change and we say if the profile information changes, if profile dot has onboarding, what I want to do is basically I can set in the state. I don't want this const has onboarding, or just simple way. Let's not do this. I use a memo, use memo, and then I have this const has link equal to this use memo, whatever this is, return false. Yeah, I use this and then also return this. So here basically or just why I did this. I just can say yeah, easy. So you can just say profile has onboarding exist, true or false. We just return this. That is all we need. I don't need use effects and don't need React. All that. So I import this. Has onboarding. So if I save this, we are in the app because we have onboarding. Let's log out. Let's log back in. So directly into the app, we don't go through the onboarding. But now, if I create a new user, sign up to, this is a new user, sign up. So we go through the onboarding process because we don't have it. We don't have that onboarding question. So I go again. So now all done, press, and we are into the app. And if I double check here, we should have now 2 users. Yes, we have 2 users. Yeah. So now we have this process and we just got into the app. We got into the app. We don't need the input props here. So remove this, clean up. And that's it. That's it for this session. Basically, we got all the data. We created a context to manage our state throughout the app. We app our app with this provider, and this provider is now providing our app with the latest profile information. We can update it. We can just get the latest information, and through checking this profile information, we can recognize if the user has done the onboarding or all the other things that we are going to do this. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode.